Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, early evening. It's just gone 6 p.m. I thought I'd come to you today with a tag. It was a tag that I saw Mark at Book Time with Alvis do yesterday, and also Steve Donahue do. It's called the 20 Bookish Questions Tag. I was convinced when I watched Mark's that I had done this, because I recognized pretty well every question. And then, but when I was watching Steve Donahue's, it started telling me, well, have I done it? And I've searched. Well, I've got a playlist of tags, and it's not in there. So I don't know. Maybe these are questions that are sort of all taken from other tags. But in any case, I thought I'd do it. And just, if it is a reprise of questions, then well, so be it. So as I say, there's 20 questions. The first is, excuse me, I do apologize. My cough has come back today. So it's sort of like you roll a dice and find out what sort of long COVID symptom you're going to have on any given day, basically. First question is, how many books is too many books in a book series? To me, I don't have any number because I like book series, or some of them. So yeah, there's no number. It all depends on how well they're done, and if they're just sort of being flogged, for the commercial value, and there's nothing of interest, and it's just the same old thing over and over again, then yeah. But that's individual to the series, and I can't think of one that I've read that is like that at the moment. Uh, so, um, Number two, how do you feel about cliffhangers? I'm fine with cliffhangers. I don't know if this is referring to sort of cliffhangers in a novel for the next book or in a series. I don't quite. I've never come across that, so it's something that I would find jarring and weird unless I had the other book right there to read, as Mark said. Because if you're reading it and it's just come out, and you got to wait a year or two for the next book to find out, it's like that doesn't work. Serial stories are fine for that, because it's like every week or every month there'd be a story, and it would have a cliffhanger, like the old movie serials, the film serials of the 30s and 40s. Well, they even did them in the silent era as well, so let's not forget those. So I'm fine with it, but I would find it a bit odd to have it in a novel, I think. uh Number three, hardback or paperback? I definitely prefer hardback books. Um, Especially like for nonfiction, definitely even fiction. If it is something I can get, because sometimes you can get the hardcover for less than you can the paperback, whether used or new. So I definitely prefer hardcovers because they do last longer. They're hardier. However, a lot of stuff that I'm reading, it's hard to get a hardcover that's reasonably priced. Uh, for instance, just before I did the video, I finished or started videoing. I finished this. It's a vintage paperback, beautiful cover, horrible spine. Um, it's Christopher Isherwood's The Berlin novel, so it's an omnibus, basically. It's two novels, Mr. Norris Changes Trains and Goodbye Berlin. And I just finished this, but I don't know if it might be like the only chance that you would have, I think, in a hardcover of this would be an older modern library edition for these, or possibly, well, there's a couple other options. I guess Everyman might have done, like, I haven't looked, or I don't think they would be an American. What's the Black series? Library of America, because they class him as an American writer for, I don't know why, because he was born and raised in the UK. Yes, he became an American citizen, but he spent his formative years in England, so therefore he's not American in that way. But anyway, but yeah, so. But the paperbacks are perfectly fine to read, and it's going to be the only way to read it. Because I don't read ebooks really at all. So, number 4 is an impossible question to answer with just one thing, and that's my favorite book. Can't be done. It's not possible to do. I can tell you some of my favorite books, which are or did one the Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. And it was a read along with Steve Donahue and Matthew at Mayberry Book Club, and I did 4 videos on that. I'll probably might do a 5th one on the series, but anyway, I've read it 3 times now, and it's one of my favorite books. C.P. Snow's Strangers and Brothers series is one of my favorite books series. Yeah, a lot of P.G. Wodehouse, City by Clifford D. Simak, getting into science fiction, Dune by Frank Herbert, Hyperion, the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons. Yeah, so there's too many to name, and I can't pick a favorite. It's really not possible. And Mark at Book Time with Elvis mentioned 3 Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome, and that's fabulous as well. And then the next one is least favorite book. Again, I don't have something that's the least favorite, but there's a few authors that I don't like that I've read most. I've read as far as I know, everything by Jane Austen, all the novels, and the Bronte sisters. Did not like them. I spent summer reading those, and that really sort of ruined sort of English Victorian fiction for me for almost 2 decades. Anyway, and F. Scott Fitzgerald is another one. Great Gatsby, I detested. Number 6, love triangles, yes or no? Well, if I pick up a book and read the back of it, and it's all it talks about is the love triangle, and that's the main thing, then no. The answer is definitely no. Unless it's an author that I do really like, and I'll read it to be sort of completist. But I don't know. But there are love triangles in other stories that are fine because they're there. Depends on how they're handled, I suppose. But generally speaking, not the favorite thing. If it's just sort of incidental, then that's fine. The most recent, number 7, the most recent book you just couldn't finish. And that would be this one here, called The Antiquarian by Gustavo Favorin Patrio. Don't know the pronunciation. It's a translation from Spanish. It came out in 2010. It sounded like it was going to be good, but I got about halfway through and I just dumped it. I will go back to this at some point, but it didn't grab me the first time. It's short enough. It's just over 200 pages, so it is something that I could read in a day. But it didn't thrill me. It's just a thrilling gem of a novel. Well, not for me. I will have to revisit at some point because the subject matter of what the guy, is I think he's a book collector, a book dealer. It's sort of about books and about an antiquarian. So, there's a lot there to recommend it. So I might try it again. Let me see. Number 8. and that's again, that's about 3 years ago that I couldn't read that. So yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago probably. Number 8, a book you are currently reading. Well, as I said, I've just finished before filming the Christopher Isherwood. The only other thing that I still well, I've got some nonfiction stuff that's outstanding and everything that I'm always reading, like these library history of library in Great Britain and Ireland. I've been reading through those for a long time, and up farther somewhere here is the history of the book in England. So, but there's a bunch of other stuff, but those I can't read now, so those are all put on hold for quite some time. This one I'm struggling a little bit with because it's almost like nonfiction. It's just cognitive uh, problems with the long COVID, but it's Niall's Saga. It's part of Sagalong, and I've got 100 pages left, so I should be able to do that in the next day or two. So that's sort of my current reading. And then number 9, the last book you recommended to someone, and that's just a couple days ago. I recommended this to a friend. It's The Uninvited by Dorothy McCardle, 1942. I think, yeah, 1942. It's a ghost story set in the late 1930s in North Devon, and fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. So is the film. I'll be doing about a week and a half, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. I'll be doing my film to book on that one. So keep an eye out for that. Mark your calendars. Number 10, the oldest book you've read. His publication date. Well, I think Mark and Steve had the same as I would be the Epic of Gilgamesh, a Sumerian epic poem. But I've also read other Sumerian tales like and Babylonian creation myths. So and there's a few of those that might be a smidgen older, possibly, than Gilgamesh. But I've also read, Ugaritic texts, Syriac texts, as I said, other Babylonian cuneiform material, ancient Egyptian stuff, all sorts. So there's lots there that are really old stuff, and I could talk till the cows come home about that material. I love it, or I used to. I haven't really delved into it much, I should say. Number 11, newest book you've read. Now, that would have to be this one here, Shadow Play by Joseph O'Connor, and that's 2019. I didn't think it was 2019, but yeah, that is, and that's a big surprise for me. It's basically, it's 1878 starts out. It's the Lyceum Theatre, London, and it's about Henry Irving, Ellen Terry, and Bram Stoker, and him sort of a bit writing Dracula. I did not like it in the end. It started out with some really good choice bits, but I just didn't think the guy pulled it off, what he was trying to do. It just didn't ring true for me. It seemed contrived a lot. But yeah, but even though it's hugely popular, there's a few people that have, there's quotes on the back from at least one person that I know, and yeah, I don't know, but it was the subject matter that did it, that pulled me to it, because it's like, yeah, it's written about Bram Stoker, Henry Irving, Ellen Terry, Lyceum Theatre, Dracula, blah blah blah. Yeah, I'm up for that. Number 12, favorite author. Again, like number 4, I can't be done. I can't say a specific favorite author. There's just too many. C.P. Snow, Evelyn Waugh, um, P.G. Woodhouse, Clifford D. Simak. There's just too many to pick one. Number 13, buying books or borrowing books. Well, I buy books exclusively now. The last book I borrowed, let's start from a library, was approximately 8 years ago, I think. And that was a couple sort of mysteries, crime fiction. Because I started around that time, about 10 years ago, I started getting into or so reading crime fiction a little more than I used to. But yeah, and the reason why, like, I have nothing against borrowing books from libraries if they've got books that I'm interested in. I moved here approximately 14 years ago. Yeah, 14 years ago now. And I didn't really have too many books. And I thought I would just use the library. Because when I was in Milton Keynes, the Milton Keynes library was pretty good. They had a lot of stuff. They had a lot of Orwell that I went through, uh, P.G. Woodhouse that I went through. Here, nothing like that. When I first came, I eventually put in, like, I went like day after day thinking of stuff and putting it in. Then I made a list about 150 or 200 authors that classic stuff, classic, literature. Uh, not like Greek. Well, some was Greek and Roman, but mostly sort of 19th century stuff, some French stuff, and I put all this in. They had nothing that was on the shelf, not one book on the shelf, and then it just despaired me because it's like you could get it, but through interlibrary loan, and it cost basically £3 per book, to get her. I think at the time it was £2.70 or something like that, and that's even from they've got it, but it's in their storage across town. But you got to pay to get it from them, and then you got to get it back at a certain time, and it just so I was desperate to read something, so they did have in their storage. The complete sort of Sherlock Holmes, 2 volumes, the short stories in a little hardcover, and the novels, 4 novels in another hardcover. So I splurged for that, and I read that. But then things sort of started to settle down for me a little bit. So I started buying some because I realized that, I could buy stuff for hardly a fraction more than it cost me to get from the library. So I began buying things, and well, as you can see, what's happened. 12 years later. I would love to have a library that had even nonfiction. Like, I went through the nonfiction, and it's like, there are a few things, just most of it, just not interested at all. There's stuff in their reference section that was interesting to read, but you can't take it out. So, um, so yeah, and it's just, but I'd love to have a good, university library, a good uh, college library that I could access, that had good humanities, history, and stuff like that. That I would love to be able to, dig into, or like the London Library. It's just that it's too far away and it's too costly. Like for the London Library, I forget what it is. It's 500, I think, some pounds a year, um, to be a member. And that's to go there. You can be a member sort of by post, I think, for less, but it's still not conducive for me. So that's sadly, and borrowing from friends. Well, I only have one friend here that I know that has any books that would be of interest to me to borrow. And he's away now, thousands of miles away, and the books are sort of um, in storage. So, but that would be the only way that I would borrow something, I think, from somebody to read, if if he would allow me to borrow it, that is. Number 14, a book you dislike that everyone else seems to love. Well, there's two here. There's this one. Well, I'm not too sure of it because I haven't finished reading that. But this one I disliked, and it's hugely popular. And I mentioned anything by Jane Austen and the Brontes. Number 15, bookmarks or dog ears. Well, bookmarks. I do not dog ear books at all. And I recently, well before Christmas, before I was made redundant, so sometime around September, October, I guess it was, I was looking on eBay, and I found a collection. It's got to be close to 1,000 bookmarks of various ones. They're good. They're good cardstock, various shapes and size. Well, they're all sort of narrow and tall. But some have squared corners, some have round corners, some have sort of celestial scenes on. Some are sort of old maps. Some of them have flowers. All sorts of things, advertisements and stuff like that on. And I bought, like I say, about 1,000 of them for a fraction, like £5 or so, £5 something with shipping. So I said, yeah, why not? I was sort of expecting to have, paper, ones that are just printed on paper, but they're good stock. Like I think I got like 100 and some, whatever gram or whatever it's called, for paper stock. So they're good. I like them, and because I usually had only bookmarks like this, like the book depository and things like that I get from books, and I usually wind up losing those, and I use that in question mark because invariably if it's a book that I like, I'll put bookmarks in sometimes areas or that I want to recheck, and then it goes on the shelf, so I lose them that way because they're in the books. Number 16, a book that you can always reread. Yeah, there's many. Mark had mentioned at Book Time with Elvis, Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. Yeah, I've read that I don't know how many times, countless times. The P.G. Woodhouse stuff I can always reread because it's sort of, I'll forget because he's written almost 100, so I can now go through and reread everything of his. Evelyn Waugh, I'd like to reread everything he's done, but I've reread Brideshead. This was the third time. City by Clifford D. Simak. There seems to be just as an aside here, a misconception of his pronunciation of his name on BookTube. It seems to be invariably said as Simak. He pronounced it as Simak because I used to have recorded interviews, so that's how he pronounced it. So that's how I pronounce it. It's like my name. It's Stand Fast, not Steadfast, not Stand Fort. You get everything, and I think it was something that was in my grandfather's time when he lived in the UK here, and I think it was probably his father that started it, was saying, yeah, it's Stand Fast, the opposite of sit slow, and people will read it off the card and never get it, and usually, invariably, it's a 50-50 chance whether they'll read it correctly, which is just boggles my mind how it's such an easy name to say. They're just like, stand and then fast. They're two words put together. How can you make a mistake of that? But people do. So and Simak, as I say, most people, or a lot of people I've heard say Simak. Anyway, 17. Can you read while hearing music? Well, depends on what you class as music. I can't listen to like loud music and stuff like that, but soft sort of classical, then that's fine, because there's always sort of the street sounds. But I got a guy that lives upstairs here that just, he calls it music, but all it is like a boom, 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 and then it repeats itself for hours on end, and it's a distorted, um, bass sound. It's distorted and muddy, and I just, yeah, it's weird how it's come. When I was that age, when I was in my teens and 20s, that kind of sound would have been frowned upon because it was distorted. It wasn't clear. You want a good crisp sound, but I think it's the fault of these things. People are listening to music on these and they sound atrocious. Regardless, like you can still hear what you're hearing, but the musical sound, the quality is just atrocious. But if that's all you know, I guess you think that that's good then. But yeah, so I can't, I don't like that. And I don't generally play music while I read. Um, I try to tune out sound. My preference would be to be in a, bunker, without, complete sound deprivation, no sound whatsoever. And I've only had that a few times, somewhere where there was no sound, and it's just heaven. It's just so lovely to read or to think or to do anything. Just no sound at all, no street sounds, nothing. And it's the same as sort of light, to be sort of, complete light deprivation to sleep. Just, I know some people that freaks them out, but it's perfect for me. Um, Let me see. Number 18. One point of view or multiple point of views. Generally, one point of view. As Steve Donahue says, it's difficult to be done well. Multiple. I did read one recently, the Berlin Alexanderplatz, that was sort of multiple points of view, and there were some interesting points to it. So, but generally, I would say single point of view. 19. Do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? I can't read anything in one sitting, or at least now, because uh, my concentration is sort of hampered. But also, to bodily functions, I have to go up and walk down the hall every so many hours, like every 3 or 4 hours, regardless of what I do. So I can't read a book in 3 hours. I might be able to read a book in a single day, depending on the size. Like something like this, I could read in a single day easily, under normal circumstances. But it depends on how the quality of the writing, if it's conducive to sort of really read quickly, and if the page is just full of text, or is it a lot of dialogue that you can just sort of scan down. But yeah, so it all depends, and it depends on the length. Um, and then I think the last question is to tag, which, yeah, number 20, who do you tag? Well, I don't know who to tag because I don't know who's done this or not. I thought I had done it. So if you're interested, feel free to do it. Otherwise, I hope you're having a good midweek and midweek reading. Everybody, take care, BookTube.